I think this kind of dives into your second part, which is a little bit under the radar, but I think companies currently that are building reusable second stages, right? So when you think of a rocket, right, in traditional rockets, right, you have two stages where the first stage, often the larger part of the rocket, helps accelerate the rocket to the upper parts of the atmosphere. So in the case of Falcon 9, about around 75, 80 kilometers, in which case the first stage jettisons off and then returns back to Earth, right? So except then the second stage goes off, reaches orbital velocity, sends the payload into its proper orbit, but then the second stage kind of either continues to float into the atmosphere, right, pretty much, or not the atmosphere, the just into orbital debris, right? And the first stage comes back and lands. Like we figured out that first stage part, but the second stage, and that's the sort of vacuum optimized engine part of the two stages. Getting that back down is something we haven't done yet. Now, Starship is going to try to attempt to do that. That's the whole plan behind it. So, and I suspect it will work. But even for all the smaller launch vehicles and sort of the medium lift launch vehicles, that isn't something that's happened. And it's very crucial to lowering the cost of space even further. And I think one of the big issues there is like heat shielding, and the fact that you are traveling much faster up in when you're trying to get to orbit versus where the first stage is traveling. I think it's something like I want to say like 5 to 7,000 kilometers per hour versus like 18,000 or something. I don't know the exact number, but like the point is like you're coming back down to Earth at a much faster velocity. So heat shielding is particularly important. There's also a lot of other kind of underlying issues that there are a few different companies that are looking to solve that I won't name, but it's really easy to Google and see who they are. I think the other breakthrough is really just what we've been talking about, Starship. We don't need to belabor the point, but I really do think that that's going to be a breakthrough in the industry. And the pace at which they're iterating and they're retiring technical risk is really just breathtaking. And I would highly recommend anyone that even has a remote interest in the industry to actually look at those tests because they're so cool and they're really inspiring. In terms of an industry or vertical or just part of the economy that I don't think gets enough attention, I think is really like the space station side of things. So I don't know how many people know this outside of the industry, but the International Space Station is going to be retired. I think by like 2031 or two is like the date because it's old and it's has many issues. And if you actually look over the last like couple of years, they've had some pretty significant issues as it relates to like their propulsion and just staying in orbit and just I mean it's old. It's an old system. But NASA has basically said that they're going to deorbit the ISS and drop it into the Pacific Ocean, right? That's going to be the end of its useful life. So there are a number of commercial space station businesses that are trying to build, a future ISS, and we need it, to be quite frank, because without the ISS, we don't have any orbital outpost or station that we can send astronauts to. And Congress has actually a directive where they want humans in low Earth orbit for many years, and we don't, without the ISS, we actually don't have anything else. So the government now is actually relying on the private sector. Meanwhile, China by the end of this year is going to just, bringing in the geopolitical side of things, like China by the end of this year is going to have its own orbiting space station called Tiangong, right? And then Russia has their own plans. And I think it would be a huge disappointment in, I think, our, industry, right? If we don't have something like that when the ISS is ready to retire. But the good news is there are many companies that are trying to do this, some that are farther along than others. But I have a lot of confidence that we're going to have a successor and it's going to be a lot cooler.